So, as you guys can see, we found very, very sleepy Nkuhuma Pride. They've all tucked up in the shade and very similar to where we left them. They're exactly the same way, and they haven't moved very far at all. They are very, very fast asleep. They are, which hopefully was what I was hoping they would not be. I was hoping that they were going to start waking up at this stage. They seem to be very fast asleep. They didn't even pop their heads up when we arrived, so still in a deep form of sleep at this stage. We might have to be a little bit patient for them to start waking up. But you can see that they are battling a little bit with the flies, so even though we're going towards winter at the moment and the temperatures are starting to cool, the insect activity is still very high and lots of biting flies around and lots of ticks still. So that's why the ears are moving so efficiently all the time and twitching. It's just to get rid of those flies as they land around the ears, and particularly around the face and nose area. But you can see how social they are. And a lot of you are commenting how cute the little cubs are. Indeed, they are very cute, but they're starting to lose that cub look, aren't they? They're starting to look a little bit more like adult lions. They're getting those features, and everything's starting to grow into the size of their ears, and their paws is all starting to get less and less and more proportioned in terms of their body. So they're starting to look a little bit more sub-adult and far less cubby as we're going along. And it's amazing to see how big they are. VM was asking me if I think that these cubs are actually the same size as Hosana, and I think maybe they are. They actually might be definitely Shongile size. They might be a little bit bigger than Hosana, though. They're getting to that stage, and soon they will be, that's for sure. You can see the spots are fading as well, so they really are getting quite big now. So many of you are complimenting VM on his lovely camera work. He is good, isn't he? VM is one of the best. It's always a pleasure to be working with VM. He really does do a very, very good job and moves the camera around with such grace and ease. So well done, Vildi. Very good job. But that is a picture of pure content behavior. They are absolutely loving the shade, and I don't think they're going to go anywhere anytime soon. I think we're in for a long afternoon of sitting and just watching and waiting and letting them do their business before we're able to actually see that they're going to stand up and move around. And I actually think with the heat that we've had today that they're only going to get going probably late this evening. But let's see. It's worth being patient for and seeing what's going on. We're also in an area where there's lots of traffic of other animals. So we're along a drainage line that leads up towards Arathusa Dam. On the other side of us, north of us, is a little pan called Sief's Pan, where zebras often like to go and drink. And so maybe one of those animals comes walking through here, and that will pique the lion's interest, and we'll see a little bit more movement from them, and they'll actually start to get up and move around like they were this morning. But it is quite difficult actually to make out one from another at the moment. They're all stacked up together. Kristen, you're wondering about the mange on the cubs or whether or not it's gone. If you have a look at that one cub at the back there, you can see on its elbow there's still a little bit of sort of scabbing that's remained. So while it is not very bad at all, there is still a little bit there, and it's slowly but surely diminishing. So I would imagine within the next little bit, probably a few months, 3-4 months, we'll see that they'll be completely healed. They've really come back from it and bounced back, and they're looking in far better condition than they were even 2 months ago. So I think they'll be just fine. And the older they get, the stronger their immune system's going to be, and the more that they're going to be able to get rid of this mite. Also, as they get older, they start to lose that cub sort of mentality of always having to be right up next to one another, and you'll find then the mite is not going to spread nearly as easily like it does with the adults. The adults, you can see, when they lie apart, they actually are in far better condition, so they don't spend nearly as much time in close proximity to one another, and So when that starts to happen, then the mane should clear up, but it is infinitely better than what it was a few months ago, that's for sure. Oh, and a big stretch there. It's that kind of afternoon. It's a siesta afternoon. I think it was much like that in the Djuma today. And everybody was kind of having siesta this afternoon, so it feels like that kind of day, and the lions are doing it very, very well. Auntie Lynn, you're wondering if all 6 are here? Of the cubs, they are. So this morning we had all 6 here. It's just that we can only see 4 at the moment because they're lying off a little bit to the right as well. We've got some in a thick bush just off to the right, which is the other 2 adult females. So where the sun is shining there, just behind that bush, is where the other 2 are. You can actually just see the back end of one sticking out there. It's quite difficult to see, but there is one in there, and then another one around the back of that bush. So all 6 are here and accounted for, which is good news, and all are looking healthy and fit. There's no limping individuals, there's no issues with any of them. They're all looking quite good, so all is well. The youngest cub that we have, which was looking a bit skinny earlier in the week and looked quite thin, is even looking a little bit better. Maybe it got the lion's share, so to speak, of the impala that they killed, and you can see it. It's the one on the back right there, so you can see that its hips are still a little bit protruding, so it could put on a bit of weight. But I'm sure what's happening with that cub is, as we've gone into summer and they're no longer feeding as heavily on things like buffalo, and they're having to rely on impalas, and probably not nearly as often as they were in the winter months, there's a little bit less nutrients, and then the body is fighting this mange that they've got, and so it's utilizing a lot to try and get rid of that, and that's why it's probably a little bit skinny, but they'll be fine. You know, we're now almost at the end of the summer months, and so there should be a bit of rain coming our way, which would mean that in all likelihood, I mean not rain, sorry, a bit of dryness coming our way, which would mean that the buffalo are going to get a bit weaker, and therefore it will be much better for the lions. Right, so we're going to sit this out and wait and see how they do and whether they wake up or not. And while we do that, let's go to a rather more active being in the form of Steph on his bushwalk. I predicted Steph is far more active than our lions. Our lions have really not moved very much at all. One little cub got up and plonked itself down in about 2 steps, so it's about the sum total of the activity that we've had so far. The sun is now just starting to dip below the horizon, so I'm hoping as that goes down that we're going to end up with a very, very beautiful sunset, 1, and 2, with some lions that are going to start waking up. It is quite nice that the sun is going down. It's also gotten a lot cooler, so I'm hoping that these lions are going to be a little bit more active shortly. We're also going to have some other vehicles joining us. Some of the commercial vehicles are going to come and have a look at the lions, and they are coming in. So I think maybe when they come in, 1 or 2 of the cubs might put up their heads, and we'll get at least a nice view on them as they do so. But isn't that the picture of absolute happiness and comfort? That is one sleepy little cub, that's for sure. You can see those noses are still very, very pink, but the blackening is starting from the bottom and along the edges. Slowly but surely they're starting to get darker and darker. And so there was a long time where they used to use the nose as a way of aging lions or leopards. They say that cats' noses change color, and that is mostly true, but I have seen multiple different cats whose noses stay pink even as they go into adults. There's a female leopard in this area called Moya, and her nose was pink until she was about 6-7 years old, so it's not really a true indication of age, but it is at least one of the signs that they could be aging as that nose starts to darken up a little bit. And you can see, there we go. So as VM just said, Shadow, who is quite old already, she's got a very pink nose as well. So Shadow is about 9 years old now, VM. Just about there. Her nose is very, very pink. But look at that cub. You can see that cub's nose is much darker than the other one that we were looking at just now. And this is the one of them that has got the very deep amber eyes as well. So there's 2 of them in this pride. There's the young cub, and there's that one. And then, of course, there's the original amber eyes, which is the adult female who is missing today. She's not with them. It's just the 3 females that are here today. Now, I wonder where she is. This morning we found tracks for the Birmingham boys, 3 of them. They were eventually found on Simambili Elephant Plain side. And it looked like in amongst those tracks was a track for a female. So maybe that's where Amber Eyes was last night, is with those boys, and she was walking around. And then when they pushed a little bit too far west, maybe she turned and went back this way. And so she's maybe hanging around somewhere here. I haven't heard of anybody calling any tracks for them. So I'm sure they are around though. But that is the picture of absolute happiness. And the two in the back are starting to have a little game together. They were pushing one another with their paws, but it seems like everybody's comfortable again. And back to sleep we go. Now you can see that during the day today, while it's been warm, they actually haven't moved very far. And on their chins, which VM was showing you there's no sign of any matting, which means that they haven't drank today. So I would imagine that when they do decide to wake up, their first port of call is going to be to find water, just to rehydrate themselves after a long day of being warm and hot and probably panting a little bit, which would have led to quite a bit of moisture loss. So I reckon that that's where they're going to go first, is maybe to this pan that I was talking about, just north of us, drink there, and then from there continue on the evening's hunting exploits. But this is about as far southwest as I've ever seen the Nkuhuma Pride. I've never seen them really push too much further than this. I've seen them a little bit further northwest of this, but never this far southwest. We're now right into the Salala's area, that Salala Breakaway Pride area. We used to see the Salalas this winter. This was all the area that they used to hang out. So we used to see the Salalas here quite extensively, and they used to be very, very commonly seen here. Now they've shifted south a little bit, and it seems the pressure from the Tortured Pride has led to the Nkuhumas actually pushing into this area now and making use of this Arathusa Dam, Arathusa Lodge, and then the south and around the airstrip area. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out if the Salalas do come back and they find these Nkuhumas here. Hopefully, with luck, this Nkuhumas won't be here, because those young males in the Salalas are now big enough and strong enough to potentially kill these cubs. So it would be a bit of a disaster if they did run into each other. Better that the Nkuhumas stick around further to the northeast of where we are. But there you can see a bit of that mange we were talking about earlier, particularly around the hind legs. There's a little tail that's sticking out, still got lots of little spots on it. It's amazing how some of them differ. It's much like our little hyena cubs that we have in the den at the moment. The one's far less spotty than the other one. Oh, look at that. Look, big, big, big yawn and stretch. And you see the size of those paws, as well as there was just a little hint of those claws coming out, and you can see how big and curved they are and damage that would be able to do. Now the size of that paw is probably easily the size of my hand, or the circumference on my face, so it would be quite something to be hit by that. I would never want to be hit by a lion. Imagine the power that is involved in that with those big, strong forearms. It would really be not a pleasant experience, I don't think. Well, this is probably quite an interesting one. You're wondering whether the cubs sleep more deeply than the adults. Well, I don't actually think so. I think the thing is that when the cubs are younger, and even now, they're far more alert to their environment because they are far more scared of what goes on around them. So they're nervous of sounds and noises and big objects moving because they know that that could potentially be a threat. So you see when a vehicle approaches, often the females don't move, but the cubs pop their head up and they're curious to see what's going on, and they watch what's going on, and they know that they have to almost be that way if they're going to survive. So that's their survival instinct kicking in, that as soon as something approaches, they can then quickly get up and move and get out of that area and try and avoid being killed. So probably not. The cubs probably don't sleep as much, although when they are very small, you find that they kind of drink and then they just pass out completely and they are almost very tired, and they tend to sleep a little bit longer than the adults do. But I don't think they sleep as deeply as what the adults do, especially big male lions. Big male lions can pass out and really very little wakes them up. Right, so our Nkuhumas are still sleeping, but Taylor has managed to find a beautiful herd of elephants, so let's go across to her and see what the elephants are doing. Well, we're just repositioning quickly because a anti-poaching helicopter came over and that caused some of the lions to get up and move into a different spot. So I'm just going to try and get us into a good place where we can see them. But indeed, those lions that Steph is talking about at Singita Lubombo were quite something. They used to hunt all kinds of large game. They were such a big pride. I remember when I first saw the mountain pride, which has gotten a bit smaller now, but the mountain pride at that stage, there was, I think, 38 of them in the pride. Now imagine a pride of 38. We get excited when we see the Nkuhumas with the 5 lionesses and the 6 cubs, which is only 11. And that's, I mean, a third of what that pride at Lubombo was. So it's pretty incredible. Now I believe that that pride has diminished somewhat and is not as big, but there's another pride called the Shishangani pride, who's also gone up to close to 40. Now, just going to see, the grass is so long that actually when they lie down, it's quite difficult to see them, but there's 2 of the adults there. They've come out into the open, and maybe that helicopter coming over was actually a good thing. Maybe it's going to wake them up and we're going to see some of the little cubs and lionesses starting to get up and groom and hopefully then get onto the move. Like I say, I'm pretty sure that they are going to head for water. It's that time of the day where they often will, especially after a very warm start that we've had today. But aren't those eyes amazing? They've got such incredibly pretty eyes already. There's one thing about the Nkuhumas is that all of them have really quite pretty eye colours. You obviously got the amber-eyed female, and then the other females have this light, very pale coloured eye, and when they look at you, it almost feels like they're cutting to the deepest part of your soul. It's quite a special thing that they have, and I really enjoy watching the Nkuhuma Pride. They are a beautiful group of lions, and it's quite typical in the summer months. They often look a little bit more scraggly than they do in the winter months. The winter months is obviously the time of plenty for a lion pride. It's when animals weaken and hunting becomes much easier. And also the grass tends to brown up a little bit, so it becomes a little bit easier for them to camouflage as compared to now with the green. Their coat colour contrasts against the green a little bit now, so they do much better in the winter months. And so you find generally in winter also there's a lot less ticks, that their coats look in better condition, and they tend to have a lot more weight in the winter months. So they will be fine. They look good otherwise. Like I say, they really are quite a pretty group of lionesses, and quite large as well. They're big girls. I see them having a little play session now. The 2 little cubs are starting to have a little play. And this is what happens. What happened that we had them earlier this week was exactly the same thing. Is that the little cubs were the ones to wake up first, and they started to be a bit boisterous and play with one another, and eventually they come over to the females and they irritate them enough that they drive them to stand up, and then the process goes until the females start to move, and then all the cubs then file in behind and follow as they move along. But look at that, it's just a mass of legs and tummies and tails and heads. It's quite difficult to make out one from another, but in there is 5 different little cubs, all packed against one another. Rebecca, a very good question. You're wondering why they have black fur behind their ears. You would think that it would be a bit ridiculous, given that they're trying to conceal themselves, and that really stands out, and it helps us to see them, no doubt. But the black fur is there for exactly that reason, and that's exactly why it's behind the ear. So when a lion is hunting, and it's going to be facing the prey item, all that prey item is going to see is the front of the lion. It's not going to see any black on the ear at all. Those ears will be flattened and facing forward towards that prey animal, so they're not going to see the black. But all the other lions behind them, so the other females or the cubs, they will pick up that black very, very easily, and they'll be able to position themselves accordingly when they're hunting. And then when they're moving and they're not hunting, the little cubs can see their mom up ahead, particularly in long grass like this. You can imagine when you're just off the ground and you're a tiny little cub, it's quite difficult to see where mom is. And those big black ears help for them to be able to follow their mom. They also have that black tip to the tail, which is exactly the same use that the ears have. Look at that, a little bit of affection amongst the adults. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if that sparks 1 or 2 of the cubs to start coming in and doing a bit of the same. And this is very common display when the lions are starting to wake up for the evening. They come and they groom one another, and they just get their coats back into good condition again before they start their nightly walk. So it's a good sign for us. It means that at least they're starting to wake up a little bit. And it must feel quite nice with those rough tongues. It's almost like being brushed, and they get to all those hard-to-reach places that you can't get to. It's like when you have an itch in the middle of your back and you go scurrying off to somebody and you ask them to try and get it for you. It must be much the same when they groom each other like this. Also, you'll find that the ticks around the ears, they help get rid of those and keep the ears in good condition. You can actually see the female closest to us. Her edges of her ears are quite tatty, and that's because of ticks. Mostly they go onto the edges of the ears and they feed off, oh sorry, she just shook her head. They feed off those edges and suck the blood, and as they get bitten off, so little bits get pulled off, and the ears over time get tatty and very, very worn. There we go, she's up again, and let's see where she goes to now. There's also some yawning from one of the other lionesses, so I'm hoping that they are going to get up and move. Now, when they do move, I'm hoping that they're not going to move back in an easterly direction, because if they go towards Arathusa, we unfortunately can't follow them, because there are some guests that are having an afternoon in that are quite close by to where we are, and so we can't follow the lions any further than where we are now. So hopefully they go in a northwesterly direction, and it will be much easier. Then we'll be able to follow them for sure. Oh, look at that. Imagine having 180 kilograms flop down on you. Can't be the most pleasant experience, and definitely a rude awakening, although that female didn't seem to flinch at all. Now you can see it's just rolling over. I'm sure there'll be a little bit of grooming again. Ah, Reese. Interesting. Well, I'm not 100% sure that colour has anything to do with it, because generally the colour of their ears, well, the black on the backside maybe, but the colour on the ears on the inside, which is where the flies tend to go, has got anything to do with it. I would imagine heat is a very good example of it. That's why. There will also be a moisture that is secreted through the wax and things like that, and that is why they go inside there. They after all of that. Also, there's very little fur in places there, so they can actually get to where the skin cells are, and they can mess around very, very close to the surface of the skin. You might find they're even gaining a bit of moisture that's coming off from the ear itself, so that's why they go in there. You'll find that they also go towards the eyelid areas where there's exposed skin on the nose, and if the mouth is open, often along the gum line areas and onto the tongue. So anywhere where there's some exposed skin and not too much thick fur is where the flies like to head and try and congregate. Although I say that, and you look on the rump of that one lioness, there's just flies all over it, so they do land in everywhere on these lions. Now, you can see what I was saying just now about the cubs coming across and starting to groom as well. So one by one we'll find that the little cubs will probably end up here, and soon all of them should be with the adult females. There comes another one. Oh, look at that, isn't that sweet? Always the best time to be with the lion pride, which is when they're waking up and they're grooming, and there's so much affection amongst them. It's such a nice time of the day to be with lions. It's always see the best parts of them and the bonding that goes on. Now, Stephen, you're saying as the cubs are coming here and the lionesses are standing up that they look quite hungry, and you expect that they're going to be hunting tonight. Well, Stephen, I'm in the same camp as you. I agree. I think they're going to definitely be on the lookout for food. I know for sure that they killed an impala last night at about 2 o'clock in the morning. It was seen on one of our dam cams, and unfortunately that impala got distributed between the masses. But when you've got 6 cubs that are growing like this, I think the lioness has probably got very little of that, and even the cubs themselves, it would have been not very much food for so many lions. So they're definitely on the lookout for a meal. They're going to be looking for anything like zebras or wildebeest, and if they're really lucky, something like a buffalo that they can get hold of. That's what they really want to be after, and hopefully they will find what they're looking for tonight. But in summer, you'll find that a lot of the time the lions do look like this. Hunting becomes much harder. We also have just gone through a full moon phase now, and when it's full moon, the lion's success rate dips completely because of the brightness of the night. The full moon comes up and everything is much easier to see, and so the prey animals see the lions a lot better. So you always find during the full moon period that lions are really not nearly as successful as they would be in a new moon phase. So now we're dipping out of that full moon into new moon. Hunting will become a lot easier, but they will hunt smaller animals like impalas to try and tide them over until they can get access to things like buffalo. And at the moment, as you've seen, if you're a regular viewer, that we're not seeing very many buffalo recently, and that's because it's summer now, so there's a lot of food and water everywhere, and most of the buffalo have moved into different areas. They've gone up into the Manyeleti and central parts of Kruger, where you get really great species of grass that grow there, and that is very, very palatable, and so the buffalo spend a large majority of their time up in that area. And then as we start to come into winter, so that grass resource gets exhausted, and then they start shifting down into the Sabi Sands area, and we start to get the herds coming through, and that's when the lions will take advantage of that. But that is one big pile of lions all mashed up together there. Oh, look at that. Isn't that amazing? It's so cool to see these guys together. Kagi, you're wondering why the Nkuhumas have been so much in the west lately. Well, it's because they are getting pressured by the Torchwood Pride. Now, the Torchwood Pride is a pride that comes in from the Kruger Manyeleti area and the Torchwood property, which lies to our east, and they're a big pride. There are 9 females and 10 cubs, so there's 19 in that pride. So it's a very, very large unit. And don't forget that these Nkuhumas have also been split. So it's just been the 3 girls with the cubs, which means when it's 3 females, they are in no way going to be able to defend themselves against 9. And you can see that the Nkuhuma females, a lot of them have got little scrapes and cuts on them. So I think they had a bit of a run-in. You can see on this female on her flank there, you see there's a few cuts there. Oh, she just sat down now. Let's see on the other female. I know there's one that's got quite a bit of scarring also on her left flank. So there's a bit of scarring at the moment. So I think they had a run-in with the Torchwood Pride, and that's pushed them further west. Also, the Birminghams have finally started pushing west again as well. During the winter months, they didn't come anywhere near this side. So they've also pushed west, which means that these Nkuhumas will be hearing those Birminghams calling around them, and they know that this is a safe area for them to enter if the Birminghams are calling, because they are the fathers of the cubs, and so that's maybe why they've pushed a little bit more. Interestingly enough as well, the Salalas are absent. The Salalas were around this area, and they seem to have gone further south and ended up more into Londolozi side, which has created this gap for these Nkuhumas to spend quite a bit of time, which is not ideal for us. It would be nice if they started coming back towards Djuma, but at least we do have Arathusa and we do get to see them fairly regularly. Now, I've just turned on my lights because it's starting to get very gloomy, and so what we're going to do is go back to Steph so that he can say his goodbyes, because we don't want him out in the dark, even though I reckon he could make it and survive a night out here in the wilderness if anybody could. But let's not test the theory, and let's go across to Steph so he can say goodnight. Fortress of bush. You can see here where there's a massive dip in front of us, and they should be coming straight towards us. They were over that way. The last time I saw them was while Taylor was linking to us, just dropping down and coming straight towards us. Now the problem is that inside here I'm pretty sure that there is water. I don't think they'll be coming outside of that, but let's see. I'm hoping that we're going to start seeing heads popping up coming towards us, because straight behind us is a really big pan that they can potentially drink at. So unfortunately for now, there's going to be one of those games of hurry up and wait and just see if we can actually see them. It's no ways that I can negotiate getting down here. It's just far too steep, so we're going to have to just be patient and wait it out, which is just fine. It's not the worst thing in the world. Now I did cleaning. You see how clean my lovely dashboard was this afternoon. That was all thanks to Taylor. While I was sitting doing my checks before our drive this afternoon, she came along with her cloth and her spray, and she was cleaning in a frenzied hive of activity, and it was very fun to watch. So it's the first for me. Definitely not required either, because I'm quite capable of doing it myself, but Taylor wanted to get it done and to see what was going on, so she managed to clean everything up, which was good for us. Now there is another vehicle that is trying to help us, because we're all trying to see where these lions go. But like I say, there's no way to actually get down here. Now I'm going to stop blinding them. So I'm going to turn off our lights quickly on that side, because there they come. See them there, Bjorn? I don't know if you can see them, but they're just coming through there. There we go. Now they're slowly coming our way. Hopefully they're going to go drink at a pan, because if they drink at this pan, it is going to be spectacular. We should get a beautiful reflection of all of them together, which would be quite something. And that picture of them all lined up along the bank would be very nice, although it looks like one is starting to drink down below here, which means that there is water down here. So I wonder if they're all going to go line up there. It looks very much like it. But there we go. Come on, come through. No. Right, I'm going to just try reposition us quickly, see if I can get a better view on them, because it looks like they have decided to drink below us here, which is not exactly what I envisioned in my drinking thoughts. I've got to be a little bit careful here because of the amount of logs that we have. No, we're not going to be able to get down there, I don't think, Vian. Let's see quickly. Here they are, straight below me. They're coming up this way, which is actually perfect for us. It means we don't actually have to go this way. There they go. So let's just see if we can try and squeeze through this little gap. We're right there, Vian. Go straight out in front of us, and it looks like they're going to come out onto the road. So I'm going to go towards the road, where we're going to get a much better, clearer view of these lions and stop messing around in the thickets. Now I had an interesting report now as well, that the Birmingham males are also up and moving, and they're coming straight east. Now I don't think they're going to get to where we are before we finish this evening, but they definitely are on their way this side. So maybe for tomorrow morning we'll have a bit of luck and be able to actually see them. But look at this, you see the lionesses leading what's going on, and then the little cubs coming from there. Hello guys. There we go. Let me get out of frame there. But you can see some of those scars there on the left side of that female in front. She's got a few, and look at her testing the wind. So she's busy smelling, trying to see if there's any sign of any animals that could be close by that she could potentially hunt. And then you see they stop and listen, so they scent the air, come out into a little open clearing, listen a little bit, try and pick up any sounds that could be around them. So this is them in full-on hunting mode. They're looking around for food items at this stage. There's a female that's coming past us here. So a little cub that should come past shortly. Now you can see that they are quite close, but it's perfectly okay. They're not paying any attention to us at this stage. Hello, little one, are you coming to see us? You can see there's one there, just walking past as well. Oh, are you going to lie down right here? See, she's going to have a little itch. So a nice little itch on the ear there before we carry on. It doesn't get more special than that. To have all these lions surrounding the vehicle is quite something. So you can see there, they're all just now in front. It is quite spectacular to have them. The atmosphere that surrounds them, even though they're not the big, impressive males, they still have this aura about them as they walk around the vehicle in the darkness. It's quite something. Now the cubs have all laid down. They're waiting for Mom. So they take the cue from the females. As soon as the females start to move, you'll find that the cubs will then start to move. Now the problem is they are starting to head in the wrong direction. They're starting to move now towards Arathusa Dam, which, like I was saying earlier, we're not going to be able to follow them if they do. So what we need is for them to go straight north over the road, or to try and come back to the western side. If they start heading straight east, we literally are right in front of Arathusa then, and we're going to have to say goodnight and leave them there. So I'm hoping that they're going to continue this way and go into the bush and be able for us to then follow them up that way. I see some of them are lying down now, and the females are still watching around and looking as to what's going on. But I don't know if maybe they've heard something, because they are really focusing very intently to the north here. I wonder if there's maybe not some impalas close by. In this area that we're in, often on this open clearing that we are up here, you'll get impalas, zebras, and then there's a lot of nyala that come off out of the drainage line section that's off to our right, where they've just crossed through, and so maybe there's some of those around, and then there's the odd buffalo that hangs around this area too, so maybe they're going to find one of those. Right, I'm going to just reposition ourselves again so we can just get ahead of the females as they walk here. So they seem to be moving up and out of the road, which is great news for us. It means we can continue with them as they go about this evening movement and see if there is any signs of anything in front here that they could potentially be hunting. I'm just trying to find a gap here that I can get in. It's amazing to me. The last time I was on this road was in November, and this area here, I remember tracking Shadow here. It was so open, there was not one blade of grass. You could see every single little footprint that she had moved and walked, and now it's completely different. Now it's long grass, can't see anything. It really is quite amazing. And isn't that spectacular with that beautiful evening light over the tops of the trees there? It really is a beautiful evening, and the perfect conditions for lions to be hunting. When that sun goes down a little bit further, and I see there's a big bank of cloud coming over the Drakensbergs, when that goes down even further, it's going to be a dark evening. The moon will only rise in the early hours of the morning, so they're going to try and make hay, as so to speak, as the sun shines, even though there will be no sun, but they're going to try and hunt now while the moon is, before the moon comes up when it's at its darkest. And if that cloud rolls in, even better, because it's going to become very gloomy out here, and perfect hunting conditions for a pride of lions. The other nice thing is there's not too much wind, so it's very, very still, which means if there's no gusting wind, then generally their scent doesn't carry too much, and they're able to then hide away effectively and not being given up by gusting blows of wind. And look at the rest in the background there. You can't even see them. The rest of the pride is just on the right side of this bush here, and in this long grass there is absolutely no sign of them. So if I shine my light, you'll see the tops of their heads there, but if I take the light away, you can see very, very difficult to actually see them. So that's why walking around at night, and why I was saying why Steph should be back in the lodge, is because of this. Barbara, you're wondering whether the cubs are too young to observe a hunt? Well, no, Barbara. Last night, I believe some of the viewers were able to catch the action of them hunting an impala, and all 6 cubs were there. So they are starting to observe hunts and starting to see what's going on, which is great news. They're getting to that age where they need to start watching and learning. So you'll probably find what happens is the females walk with them towards where they're going. They spot a prey item. The cubs will then lie down, and the females then proceed, and they watch what's going on from afar. So they see how the females are moving, and they'll be learning from that. They'll be seeing how they position themselves and how they create the opportunity to hunt. So they are at that phase now. They are starting to learn how to do this, which is great news, because it means in about 3-4 months' time, we should see them starting to try and actively hunt with the pride. Now, they're probably a bit small to actually bring down anything of serious size, but you'll find things like impalas will be of fair game to these lions when they reach about a year and 2 months old, and they will start participating in those hunts. In terms of buffalo, that'll be a while still. These guys won't really get involved too much until probably they are around 2.5 years, where they'll have a significant amount of weight, particularly if there's any males. Well, we know that there's one male in here. Then the rest will be able to help out a little bit later. Then normally the females start to really help on the buffalo hunts at around 2.5, 3, whereas the males already at 2 with their bulk are able to do so. So it's going to be interesting times ahead, and hopefully it will be very, very rewarding ones for us as well. So we're going to carry on with them now that they've sat down a little bit. We're going to take this opportunity to go and see what Taylor McCurdy's up to and see what she's busy cleaning now, and then we'll see where the lions go after that.